This is the European edition of Breaking Banks, the world's #1 FinTech podcast and radio show. We bring you the European unicorns, startups, founders, regulators, and leaders innovating the rapidly evolving FinTech scene today. A truly localized podcast with both English and local language content, with some of the world's most well-known hosts and influencers in the FinTech sector globally. Join us every week as we explore what makes the European Union a phenomenal proving ground for many of the fastest growing FinTech plays in the world today. Okay, let's roll.
Hello guys, welcome back to Breaking Banks Europe. My name is Matteo Rizzi, I'm the executive producer of the show, and today is episode number 65. The format of today is FinTech journeys around the world, and you will see that the country we are going to talk about today is not often in everyone's radar screen. But I hope that by the end of this show, you will understand why it should be. I have 3 amazing guests with me today. I will ask them to start by introducing themselves, a couple of minutes of their story, and then, as usual, we will kick in with an informal dialogue. I will start by the one who I know best. We have been friends for a long time. Again, one of the pioneers of the whole FinTech movement back many years ago when we were within a tribe and, back to my own very swift time. Nadeem Shaikh, welcome for the first time to Breaking Banks, my friend. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Matteo. Thank you for such a warm welcome. And it's awesome to be on the platform finally. I remember when Brett King and you guys were thinking about this and started this years ago. So thank you so much for hosting us and focus especially on Pakistan. So my background, as you indicated, I come from the technology side, with the application of financial services. I started, very few people know about this, but I started my life as a COBOL programmer in New York on Wall Street, which lasted about 6 months. And I've just dated myself. I'm not sure even some of the other audience members know what COBOL is.
Probably a few.
Probably a few, right? And so the journey then became really about building systems around different aspects of banking, both corporate banking, retail banking. I ended up in a company, a large payments company based out of the US, where I was running their Europe, Middle East, Africa business, for a while. And that was, got introduced into a lot of the emerging market players. Then I set up a couple of co-founders. We set up the first FinTech fund, or one of the first pioneers, if you may, in 2010. And everyone thought we were crazy when we did that. And there was no such thing called FinTech. I then witnessed the evolution of FinTech in 2014, 2015, when UK came on the scene and, started to take shape. In the last few years, I had the opportunity of working deeply in Pakistan. Firstly, both as a corporate employee and then really setting up their own platform. And I think there is such a huge opportunity and potential in Pakistan right now. So we created a venture building firm, which is called Neem Exponential, which we have been working on for the last year. And that's where we are right now, operating out of Karachi.
Thank you, Nadeem. Let's move now on to Taha, who is representing more like the entrepreneurs ecosystem of the country. Taha, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matthew. So I started my journey right after I graduated. The passion was to build something huge right after college. And I tell this to a lot of people that there was naivety, tons of it, which is why I jumped the way I did. I started a healthcare business, a diagnostics business, far away from my education and experience. But it was amazing building a brick and mortar business in Pakistan, looking at absolutely every possible facet. So we built a diagnostics labs business in Pakistan. Saw multiple facets of running a business. So it was a very expensive learning for me in terms of trying to understand how businesses work. And I did that for 9 years, jumped into the digital world, joined a startup as chief operating officer called Eat Mubarak. We were in the delivery and logistics of food. So we did everything around food ordering, logistics, and we at one point in time were one of the fastest growing Pakistani startups. So did that. Unfortunately, couldn't raise, so had to then shift gears to another journey. So I joined Burger King as its executive director to turn around the business. Alongside that, the startup journey could not die. So I started working around the FinTech space, trying to understand it, launching a FinTech solution around schools to collect payments, a huge space here in Pakistan. So yeah, I've dabbled with many different sectors, but yeah, that's what I love. Why I love being an entrepreneur.
Thank you. Last but not least, Mubariz Siddiqui. He's a lawyer, so I think that most of the regulation question, the most tedious one, are going to likely come to your direction. Although I know that you have also an entrepreneur experience. Mubariz, welcome to the show. Introduce yourself.
Thank you so much for having me, Matteo. And thank you so much for covering Pakistan and sharing our journeys and our stories from this part of the world. So I started practicing law in 2008 at a corporate law firm, then moved to another corporate law firm. In 2015 is when I started off practicing independently and tried my hand at a venture myself. The venture didn't work out as well. I sold my stake to my co-founders in a co-founder buyout and exited that. Currently, I am the general counsel of a venture capital firm in Pakistan called Sarmaya Kar. It's domiciled in Europe, in the Netherlands, but it's Pakistan-focused fund. Since 2015 till now, actually, I have been consistently working with startups, typically founders who want to raise, and angel investors, and now funds, of course. And I've seen the whole trajectory in Pakistan change over the past 5 years, where the journey, which Taha is speaking about, started at a point where people were not really funding anything. And I kind of get the naivety that Taha also highlighted earlier. And I think that's the naivety that I needed to leave my law firm, cushy law firm jobs to start something of my own. And I'm just glad to be part of the ecosystem as it has evolved over the past 5 years. So yeah, so very happy to be here and very happy to address any regulatory questions you might have.
Thank you, Mubariz. Actually, I wanna start with you, Mubariz. So let's share a little bit to start with some numbers, on Pakistan, on the ecosystem itself, starting from, percent of the population who is like financially included, rural area versus more sort of urban areas, just to give visibility to, both to the ecosystem and its setting, and then whatever other sort of general information about how the ecosystem of investment has evolved, how many startups there are, and any of you, both Nadeem and Taha, who wants to jump in later on, talking about the different accelerators, how the incumbents are playing. I will pilot the conversation, but let's start with give us some big settings with you, Mubariz.
Thanks. So I think a macro bird's eye view of Pakistan, as you spoke about, is probably will probably give everyone a good sense of the market that we're speaking of. Pakistan has 200 million people. This is I would say the sixth or the seventh largest population in the country in the world. Out of those 200 million people, we have around 100 close to 100 million SIM cards, people with SIM cards, and then the number around smartphones and people who have internet penetration is smaller. It's around, I think, 70 to 80 million now. It's been increasing very rapidly. But one thing that's very important to understand is that Pakistanis actually, when I talk about Pakistanis, I'm talking about the broader population, actually had access to internet is when we got 3G first. Right. Before that, we had broadband, and people in urban areas and people belonging to certain social income classes could always access internet and high-speed internet. But when we talk about the rural area, the rural Pakistan, which again, to answer another one of your questions, I would say the divide is 60-40 or 65-35 between rural and urban in Pakistan, very, very roughly, anecdotally speaking. Now, we got 3G internet on our phones in 2017 or 18 is if I'm not wrong, 2017, 2016, 2017. I would request one of my fellow panelists to correct me if I'm wrong. It's a little earlier. You're saying you're on mute, Nadeem.
2014, 2015. So
2014, 2015. Yeah, okay, fine. Sorry.
Still is not a distant past.
Yeah, it's not so far away. Sorry, my bad. So 2017 is when I remember penetration increasing in the rural areas and markets becoming more interesting. So to speak from a venture investor's perspective, Pakistan this year raised all venture investment in Pakistan equated to around the high. We've seen different figures, and there's no way to always know the exact figure, but around 70-odd million, 77 million is the figure of venture investment in Pakistan. Compare that to India. India was more than 10 billion. If we are 1/10 the economy, we are 1/5 the population, we are a fraction, a very, 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 very small fraction of venture funding. So clearly, the history of Pakistan is a history of people not investing in people generally, people investing in assets. However, that is now changing. People have there's a lot of opportunity that is now being recognized. Predominantly in tech and broadly in tech. I'm not focusing on FinTech. Broadly in tech, the understanding is, and the patterns are, that people will slowly move towards consumption patterns through digital channels, as opposed to through the same old conventional channels of consuming the same thing, whether it's food, whether it's transport, logistics, anything. So digital obviously plays a big part. Now, in terms of financial inclusion, Pakistan has had limited financial inclusion throughout, and that's because building that infrastructure all across the country for 200 million people, bricks and mortar, is not really possible. So it required this kind of digital penetration for us to have. For us to be ready for FinTech. And we are. To highlight a notable exit in FinTech in Pakistan was Telenor Microfinance Bank, which was initially started, is basically, if you were to really think about it, is actually a domestic remittance, payment remittance platform where people who make salary in an urban area would like to send money to their family in a rural area, and they can just do it through their mobile phone. That was acquired partially by Ant Financial, which is now running it. This was $500 million valuation, close to $500 million valuation exit. So Pakistan right now is ready. The time is ready. The fundamentals are there for us to pick up in FinTech. I'd actually also would love to hear my fellow panelists' views on how they see this space.
Thank you so much, Mubariz. I think this really is Pakistan at an inflection point, right? So if you look at the metrics, and a lot of people comparing now these days to Indonesia, and we are like 7-8 years behind. And Mubariz picked up and highlighted the key point, which is the broadband penetration, the 3G penetration. That came very late on versus some of the other markets around us. But you see the acceleration now happening. And this digitization is going along every sector. We look at agriculture, we look at education, health, financial services, mobility, clean energy. There is a sector, tourism, right? All of these things being impacted by that. I think it is we also, there's some things coming together, and we are also the third largest freelance market in the world, right? Which is pretty impressive, which is pretty interesting, right? So folks are, I think we talked about, my co-panelists talked about some of the naivety. I think it's also a word I would add to it is courage. And people are now starting to have the courage to go into these spaces as opposed to pursuing the regular corporate jobs, right? And the regular corporate jobs also are limited, right? And limited to the main urban cities of Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad. And if you are outside of those cities, you have very, a few opportunities to really go into something different. And now we're seeing these startups evolution happening across the country. And, there are lots of national incubation centers, similar to, Matteo, what you and I saw in terms of the incubation centers in Europe emerging around Europe. Same thing's happening around Pakistan. So they've gone outside the main cities, and some of the smaller cities now also have this. And they are, some of them private, a lot of them are public-private, collaborations. So it's starting to really, see the entrepreneurial spirit across the country. And so that's what you're seeing a lot of. And I think, maybe we'll come back to some of the policy making and some of the encouragement that the government is doing, both the regulatory side and so on. And maybe Mubariz can comment on that later. But you're seeing that, it all come together very nicely, right? All the pieces are sort of starting to come together.
You mentioned, Nadeem, that the sort of the entrepreneur's spirit is sort of pervading the country. And that's a great transition to, how I wanted to ask the next question to Taha, because you've been an entrepreneur on more like, I want to say traditional, and actually one of the most Western industry I can think of, because Burger King is not exactly a startup, but also on the more tech side. How is it to be an entrepreneur in Pakistan in the past decade?
I think it has transformed a lot. So when the time I started off, I think the ecosystem of what we see now did not exist at all. And so there are a bunch of passionate people trying to do things. The kind of capital available for them was not essentially, you could call it venture capital. It was either loans or very hard ways to actually raise money as well. And the kind of support system that entrepreneurs require to really do their best out there wasn't really available. So a lot of these incubation centers and venture capital firms, even pre-seed venture capital companies coming into Pakistan, what they've done is that they've given a lot of confidence to people who want to make that jump. And now you see people leaving their high-end corporate jobs, probably in the US or in the Middle East, coming back to Pakistan, trying to build a story, which I think is great. And it's because of, one, what the time is right. And the other thing is that there's more maturity on the kind of capital available, the kind of support available for those entrepreneurs as well.
Actually, Taha, a built-up question, because you mentioned about the diaspora, of the Pakistani entrepreneurs, like coming back to the country and start to, I don't want to say give back, but simply using their own skills and capabilities to build stuff for their own country in their own country. How this is important versus the Pakistani born and raised entrepreneurs? Did this diaspora help a lot in spreading the entrepreneurship culture, you think?
Yeah, I mean, there are both opinions on this. The ones who've done their complete journeys here, of course, believe that, they've seen it all, they know it all. But I definitely think, if you worked at high-scale companies in the region, you worked at Facebook, you worked at Google, you know how scale works, right? And that is so important, being the modern entrepreneur, right? And when one of those things come into the region in terms of the companies and the overall ecosystem, I think it really helps, because that elevates everyone who's part of it.
Yeah, and And actually, talking a little bit more about how the ecosystem is structured. Back to Nadeem. Nadeem, you and I saw that in places like London over a decade ago, what was really important was, okay, it is great to have all these startups that are coming with innovative idea. Most of them wants to eat, banks' lunch in some of the cases. And if banks are not, are not anywhere to be eaten lunch from, they want to sort of dive into financial services without having sometimes the shoulders, big enough, to be able to play a role. So at the end of the day, there is always a good tension between startups and traditional players, the incumbents, especially in fintech and financial services, that has to find the right balance. How's the situation in Pakistan, Nadeem?
Yeah, really great question. I think Mubariz touched on it a little bit. So the traditional banks have been focused more on the urban because of the infrastructure requirements, right? The brick and mortar stuff. So while the state bank for a long time has stipulation that if you have a banking license, it doesn't matter what kind of banking license, you have to have so many ATMs, you have to have so many branches, and so that required capital. And so the penetration was, low, right? Because of that, people not expanding, and there was a lot of risk to that. So the nice thing about what's happened in Pakistan, when we talk about banking itself, but it applies to prop tech, insurtech, and other aspects of businesses, mobility, right, is that there have been wide open gaps that no one was fulfilling. Right? So if you think about the SME sector, for example, there are 4.1 million corner stores in Pakistan, something thereabouts, right? And just in the last year, there are literally dozens of startups, all of them getting good funding, that are starting to attack that area. And not attack that area by taking it away from someone, but providing services and so on that no one was providing before. And so the way the consumer base were being accessed and what kind of service would be provided to them, the way the design of the product was structured, what really makes sense, what's digitally available, what they can use really in the day-to-day life and so on. So when we talk about this financial wellness aspect, right, which is not just about providing a bank account in terms of financial inclusion, but really providing the holistic needs of consumer. That is what is happening now. And so with that happening, the incumbents are opening up as well, right? So there are lots of collaboration going on between the incumbents and some of the innovation centers and so on. They've been supportive of that. And in Pakistan, the telco players are also playing a lot in financial services. The two large telco players, Jazz and Telenor, have substantial businesses in the financial inclusion payment space, right? So by the name of Jazz Cash and EasyPasa. So they are playing in there. So they're also a major player. And so you see this collaboration going on. You also see some structural funds coming out. So one of the large banks in Pakistan just announced the fund that they're going to invest in. You also see business groups coming into the play. They are also setting up their own fund structures and so on. So you're starting to see the emergence of a new set of investors. Some investors, part of the group businesses and so on, structures, which are also extending, going beyond the asset investment, meaning that going beyond mostly real estate. Now they're expanding into the technology sector broadly, of which FinTech is probably the second largest investment sector. I think it's transportation right now, transportation, mobility, FinTech, e-commerce, and then from there it goes into health tech and so on. So that's kind of the landscape that's happening in Pakistan.
That's super interesting. And actually, I realized that I could have mentioned it before, but Pakistan is one of the focus countries of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Financial Services for the Poor division. And shout out to our friends, Costa Peric, former Reno Tribe and Swift and an amazing friend. And I think that, there are good reasons, for this book being chosen, which is certainly proportional to the potential, that you Nadeem have just highlighted. Guys, before getting back with Mubariz into the conversation, let us have a super quick break. Stay with us for the part 2 on the Pakistan ecosystem. Stay with us, guys. Thank you.
At timepledge.org, we are building the largest free coaching and advisory platform for entrepreneurs by providing mentorship opportunities based on pledged time. Our network of seasoned industry experts acting as coaches is working for free, pledging their valued time to the next generation of entrepreneurs who will change everything. Our portfolio of sessions goes over every skill an entrepreneur needs to successfully launch his or her startup, from how to pitch and behave with investors to how to best market your idea online, or even how to best manage your team. We have the perfect sessions with the perfect mentors. Want to learn how to become the best entrepreneur you can be, or mentor the next generation of entrepreneurs in Africa and Asia? Please visit timepledge.org and let's get you started.
Welcome back, guys. This is FinTech Journeys Around the World on Breaking Banks Europe, focusing on Pakistan. Mubariz, Nadeem, and Taha are with us today. Great first part of the show. And now let's get back into, where does the money go? Okay, for Mubariz started this show by telling us a little bit how much money he went into Pakistan, and now let's dive in a little bit more into which type of opportunities does he, as an investor, sees in the country, and how are other investors playing in the field? Is co-investment a common practice? Tell us a little bit more, Mubariz.
Sure, thanks. So Pakistan is an interesting space, but while it has its unique challenges and a unique characteristics, but you can't not see the similar patterns have happened in other parts of the world, Vietnam, Indonesia, etc. They've gone through largely similar journeys. It's just that we've started that journey a little late, just because of our macroeconomic and political circumstances. What's interesting is I would say the role that the regulators are playing in Pakistan today, and I'm actually, touch wood, extremely happy about the initiative that they're taking, realizing that this is a space where the most activity can happen. Now, just to give you some more perspective, Pakistan has a current account deficit, whereby our imports are much more than our exports, and one of our strongest exports are IT services. It's information technology services, where we have a very good engineering talent, which is being outsourced by firms all across the world, not including Silicon Valley, Europe, etc. So while we have that talent base and we are creating value, it's just that value is not being created for Pakistan. It's being created for some entity or business abroad. And the realization is that what's lacking for a Pakistani entrepreneur, a Pakistani business, is the access to capital, access to smart capital where risk is being taken. And just to circle back to something I highlighted earlier, is that Pakistanis are generally historically not invested in other Pakistanis. Pakistanis have historically invested in assets. I think it has to do with the weak enforcement system, a judicial system that has existed in the past and which is now also improving. This is due to several factors, but typically access to finance, private equity, or venture capital was not available to any ordinary person. But however, now realizing all of that, State Bank of Pakistan is constantly making it easier for foreign investors to invest in Pakistan, and more importantly, repatriate their profits from Pakistan, especially venture investments and risk-based investments, including different debt instruments. The Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan has actually they created a sandbox, a regulatory sandbox, especially for fintech services, which is no regulator in Pakistan has ever created a sandbox before. Just to put the things in perspective, why that's important is because there are so many finance products that people want to build, and Pakistanis want to use. It's just that the regulator hasn't thought of yet and does not have an existing licensing regime for. So what they've done is they've created this sandbox where they can test and pilot things, different business models, because again, it's financial services. You don't, as a regulator, it's also, their job is also not easy. They have to protect the consumers that are consuming those services. So the regulatory sandbox is there, and then there's international organizations, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which is they're partners in Pakistan, Karandas. They have worked extensively with State Bank of Pakistan to build the rails for fintech. So we have launched RAST, which is essentially would build the framework on which different applications can be built. Think of it as the universal payment interface UPI in India, on top of which Google Pay, etc., is functions of. And Pakistan finally has that. I think Nadeem alluded to this earlier. Banks in Pakistan, the incumbents typically, while they are picking up or at least realizing that there's something here, it's just that they have been very, very profitable lending to the blue chip companies in Pakistan and the government of Pakistan. It's hard to find motivation to then start a consumer book and then start lending to consumers and start taking that risk when you can just lend to one of the top companies in Pakistan, and that's still a better bet. So what that has done is it has left a huge gap in consumer financing. So just to give you a little bit more numbers around this, Pakistan has 1 million credit cards. They're not unique. 1 million in total. There's 200 million people. POS machines, Pakistan has around 70 to 80,000 POS machines. 1,000. That's it. Compare this to Turkey or Iran, which is less than half the population, and they have 3 million, 4 million POS machines, because you can literally pay digitally anywhere. Let's not forget that Pakistan is predominantly cash based, because there's a huge, larger than the documented economy is the undocumented economy in Pakistan, and that's where the opportunity also lies for any fintech play right now. The opportunity arises in so many of these other industries that are currently relying on inefficient cash payments, on lack of access of financing to grow their businesses, and to be able to then facilitate more or operate in a clearer, in a quicker, in a more efficient manner. Taha, who's run a diagnostics lab, I'm sure can add more around the journey of an entrepreneur and the lack of infrastructure around, and the opportunity that leads to.
I will also allude to how when we were building Eat Mubarak, the food delivery and logistics company, we tried every way to collect money. It was through wallets, it was through credit debit cards, but 95% of transactions happened on cash. Right, and while it's a huge problem, it's a huge problem to solve as well for entrepreneurs. And I'm of the opinion that Pakistan, how it's uniquely positioned, we've missed waves of the traditional banking, of the internet banking, and we're now directly jumping into the modern peer-to-peer banking, I would say. So we've jumped these. We've skipped these. Our people generally have not seen these journeys in their lives, and they're jumping onto something which is absolutely new, which I think is also great, because you don't have all that baggage that anyone needs to carry, and you're jumping into new verticals, newer opportunities, and and also ways to how to convert cash into different other opportunities. I'll mention Mubariz knows about Bikea. It's a logistics company. They've recently raised a huge round. They've really used this as an opportunity to collect cash and then convert that into digital money. Right? Someone has to do that in that process. So, it's great. There are tons of problems to look at, and there are tons of opportunities because of that.
Nadeem, before you jump in, I just wanted to I am actually listening, live to these comments. Like most of the breaking banks, Europe auditors will do it for the first time, and I don't know if you can feel it, but through their voices, it sounds pretty clear that Pakistan is in a sort of a unique position, because on one hand you have a friendly regulator who understood that. It is for the greater good of the country, becoming friendly to financial services, to financial inclusion, to financial literacy, to apply technology to financial services. At the same time, the venture capitalists are starting to pay attention. And actually, it is way deeper than financial services. We mentioned the attention that largest investors and NGOs and impact investors such as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are paying to Pakistan. Actually, the more this dialogue goes on, the more I realize how unique the opportunity in this country is. So Nadeem, I understand why you dedicated your past years into this. Do you want to talk to us a little bit more about it?
No, sure, it'd be a pleasure. So you see the excitement, right? It's so if you put in perspective, the FCA, the UK regulator, created the sandbox as the first one of the really pioneers in 2015, right? And I was one of the authors of that report that led to that creation, right? And so Pakistan's regulator created that in 2020. Right? So it's only 5 years, right? It's not like a decades later we are catching up, right? And I think this is where, as the guys were talking, it's really the term which we use a lot, Matteo, in our world of embedded finance. But it's kind of a term that people use. But in the context of Pakistan, it becomes really powerful, right? Because the basic payment infrastructure is not there. So every industry requires to build payments, lending, insurance, right? It's not there as a party and you plug it in and it happens, right? So one of our platforms we work with at Neem Exponential is a Bakhabar Kisan. It's an informed farmer, right? And they are really providing services using weather, soil data, input data to the farmer. And they have 16 million farmers on their platform, right? And the 16 million farmers, they require how to facilitate payments, how to get the access to the right kind of working capital, how to provide insurance. So some of the players that we know in our world, in the US and Europe, they become huge based on like hundreds of thousands of consumers. Right here, a basic startup, and this is a startup. They have not raised money yet. Right, so they already have 60 million active customers on their. So that's the demand. So when people talk about, people are not educated, they don't have access to tech. If you provide the right kind of product, people will come. Right, and I think what's happening a little bit in Pakistan is, if you look at the numbers that Mubariz referenced to about 2020, 80% of the funding came from international funders. Right, so we've talked about the Gates Foundation and some of the other folks, but really it's a slew of VCs, family offices, DFIs coming in, and it's starting to build. So almost every deal you talk about in the last couple of years, and you look at across the sectors, whether it's agriculture or e-commerce or financial services or insurance tech, education, health, you'll see people playing, right, who are non-Pakistani. So that's where the interest is building up. And every year there are more people turning and saying, okay, how do I get involved? How do I build it? Because the scale is immense, right? And I think sometimes these things also work together, right? So the acquisition of Careem by Uber, where Careem, has one of the founders is Pakistani. 80% of their Careem's infrastructure was in Pakistan. A lot of the tech and operations and stuff are handled out of Pakistan for the region. A significant portion of their valuation, I don't have the precise number, but a significant more, like 70% of something in their range, of their valuation that Careem was attributed to their business in Pakistan for the region, right? Region meaning Middle East, North Africa, right? Middle East, North Africa, and so on. So the first time there were a set of folks that were working in a startup who actually exited with significant, money. It's not in the Silicon Valley sense of billions of dollars, but it was, individuals that had millions, right? And there were not one, there were dozens of them. And so that's the first time people saying, actually, this is possible. I can go and build a business. I can have the courage and stuff, but there's reality behind it. And for a long time, people were building these businesses organically. So kind of sort of thinking, okay, how do I make revenue? How do I need to make my cash flow work? There's no investor coming in to help me build the product and then get the consumer base. I had to do all those things in parallel. So now that the funding is coming in, you're seeing a different mindset of saying, okay, and this is where, Taha talked about the mindset of the Googles and Facebooks and so on, the scaling mindset, people saying, how do I really scale this? And not only scale it so I don't have to do this organically. And that's the change that's happening over the last bunch of years, where people are starting to put it all together with the environment, as a regulator-friendly environment, which is kind of saying, this is possible. We can do this. And I can see real value on this stuff.
No, I completely agree with Nadeem and the observations there. One another thing that I would like to highlight is the fact that the lack of debt available to companies and the lack of other funding options. Equity is the most expensive form of finance. Completely agree. And sure, in the beginning, you need that smart capital to start validating your hypothesis. You just need that smart capital to validate whether there's product market fit and whether you need to grow. But the lack of debt available to, and we spoke about this earlier, where the banks are not really interested and they would rather lend to a big blue chip company. The lack of debt really, really significantly hinders growth of a lot of players in Pakistan, and I feel that is also kind of changing, especially towards SMEs. There are initiatives in the works, not announced yet, but in the works, where there would be access to debt available to Pakistanis SMEs and startups as well. So things are changing. The infrastructure is improving. Of course, Rome wasn't built in a day, and it will take time. We're all new. Pakistan's new to this kind of activity, and we feel this is it will only get better from here.
Actually, what I wanted to maybe double click in possibly the last minutes of the show is this a tremendous opportunity brought by what everyone understands embedded finance is. And I believe that, what some of the things that Nadeem just talked about are like the sublimation of it, right? So when you think today, you shouldn't think about a ride-hailing business anymore. Nobody does that. Everyone realized that a ride-hailing business by itself, it is super capital intensive. It will sooner or later fight against regulators. It will sooner or later fight against the establishment of the taxi companies. But if you take this platform approach, where actually ride-hailing becomes the beginning of payments digitization, micro lending, financing of the vehicle, digitization of salaries, micro insurance, and so forth. Like the example you just brought, to me, a country where there is a platform that has 16 million farmers on it, I'm actually, it's incredible how they haven't by themselves taking all the investments, all the 80 millions that of venture capital that went into the region. What I believe is incredible is how the mindset, of this sort of platform economy, almost learning by everything that happened in other parts of the world where similar type of innovation opportunities were aligned, how you guys are actually learning from it. Taha, I see you're nodding. It looks like you agree with me.
Yeah. I'll probably share that experience because it just resonated with me. I told you 95% at Eid Mubarak, our startup in the delivery space, was cash. But the other half of it was not, right? When we banked it with ourselves, we started distributing the cash via the banking channels. And that did something that we couldn't understand at that point in time. But later brought that network effect to us. So we were probably disbursing money for more than 3,000 restaurants in Pakistan. We were collecting on their behalf and disbursing it. Later on, our bank, which, relatively a modern FinTech, came to us and said, hey, you're sending this money to a specific restaurant every month. It's X amount of money. How about we start lending that 80% of that money to the restaurant itself? It'll empower your story. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So we started building that platform. We allowed them to ask for or request for loans directly, and they would directly be remitted to their accounts. Now, as a platform player, we became way more important for the restaurants. Likewise, we had over 400 riders on the platform. They used to just be on our payroll. They used to carry a lot of our cash. But once they banked that money, these guys came in and said, hey, we want. So for them, the two most important things for these riders are their cell phones and a bike, which should be functioning. So how about we start lending them on these products as well? So it just sort of built in terms of how the network effect impacts all of us once you start building the story and convert that physical into digital.
Yeah, just to develop further on what Taha just said, I think when we talk about embedded finance, what we need are those the essential platforms on which you're going to build the financial services on, right? And those are built. Those services are primarily driven by data, and those decisions are data driven, and it can only happen once you have that sufficient data and once you have that network that you've created on which you want to offer this. Now, the Taha brought up Baikia earlier. Baikia is one of our investments and one of our portfolio companies, and Baikia Cash is there, which is again a fintech or a financial service that is offered on top of the huge network of motorcycles that we have. So it will catch on, and we think that's one of the biggest opportunities. But to start off with, first collecting consumer data enough to be able to make a decision regarding a financial service being offered to them. Pakistan is still on that path, but not there yet. So I think embedded financial services, while some cases that have been existed that have had the head start are ready for it, are ready to offer financial services. However, there are a lot more companies that are building those networks on top of which they can go on and offer financial services.
Thank you, Mubariz. Let's talk about talent a little bit. So I haven't checked, but I'm pretty sure that amongst the three of you, you do have this information. I am pretty sure about the fact that Pakistani population average is pretty young. So therefore, there is a unique opportunity to develop, not only tech talents, but in general to build a virtuous circles, between academia, entrepreneurship, investments, and more of a traditional player. So let's focus a little bit on how do you see, the talents development in the country in general. Maybe Nadeem, you want to start with, and I know that Taha has a couple of stories on top then.
Yeah, so absolutely. I think this is exactly where the exciting thing is happening, right? So Pakistan's, it's like some numbers, like 65% of the population is 30 and below, right? And it's a young, tech-savvy environment, right? So people are excited. They all have cell phones. They're all accessing this stuff readily, right? So some of the stuff we used to talk about in Europe and saying, well, that's like most of the people that have money and stuff is a 70%, and there's a small millennial group that may be early adopters, right? In Pakistan, it's completely opposite. That's the main consumer group. All of them are sitting there wanting to get on as quickly as possible. So you see you see the talent emerging, and maybe Taha can comment on some of the university mafia, which has become entrepreneurs. But you see, even representing in this call, you see the talent. There's over the last bunch of years, there's talent emerging around the investment space, venture capitalists. There's like 3 or 4 funds that started up. A lot of investment professionals coming in. People thinking about what's the right deal look like, what's the right kind of convertible note look like. All this information was not present before, right? So that lingo is starting to come in, and people are like going, "Wow, this is great." The conversation around sandboxes and stuff. The legal fraternity, which Mubariz, is too narrow a definition for Mubariz to call him a legal guy. He's kind of, really an entrepreneur building this whole ecosystem. But that fraternity is waking up, and so a lot of support coming out. People are thinking about, how do we do this? The entrepreneur talent, and it's not just the entrepreneur talent, and we are all men represented here, but there's a significant portion of female talent coming in and female founders coming into Pakistan across all kinds of sectors of industry, right? And so that's really the exciting part, where it is a huge potential, people hungry for information, hungry to learn, and really adapting and learning very quickly from the international models and taking it on and kind of saying, how do we kind of make it work for the Pakistani environment, right? So that's where you see a lot of the excitement happening, and why you see the acceleration of, an impact on the ground and people actually putting these businesses together because they are learning very, very fast.
Yeah, just to add on this, Nadeem. So we see talent coming into the entrepreneurship space from very different facets of life. We've talked about people coming back to Pakistan, wanting to set up their own startups, their journeys. That's there. And then the successful ones that Nadeem mentioned, anyone who's exited those journeys now want to go ahead and set up their own thing, right? So, it's said that Kareem and the people there would essentially become what PayPal did in the US. And then there are universities, like the top universities. There's so much focus. There's LUMS, IBA, NUST, where the focus has shifted so much in terms of them trying to push towards going towards the best possible jobs, towards them becoming entrepreneurs and trying their hand at it. And because the ecosystem is now a lot mature, there's help available. I think they'll do a much better job in terms of executing those ideas.
I just have a little thought to add to it. 2 stories, very simple. 2015, I was working out of this accelerator, Nest.io, which is a Google-backed accelerator in Karachi. There's 2 guys, they're working on their startup. And they used to work at Daraz before, which is a funded e-commerce company, but a big tech company with proper salary. And they left that to start their startup, but they did not tell anyone at home. So they would tell them that they're going back to their cushy, high-paying job, but actually secretly working on their startup at this incubator. Today, fast forward 5 years, there are people who are leaving Morgan Stanley, Google, etc., and moving back to Pakistan to start their startup. So just to show Pakistani parents, like all Eastern parents, would want you to stick to your very good job, that mindset has also changed because now they've seen people they've seen this work actually. So the talent is naturally being driven here, and they can see a lot of value that they can create and capture.
When Nadeem and I sort of prepared or got the idea of this show, we definitely talked about a lot of potential collaboration, typically with timepledge.org, which is this platform that I co-founded a couple of years ago around entrepreneurs coaching on soft skills. Help them, how to pitch their idea, how to bootstrap their company, especially to help first-time entrepreneurs on soft skills, and I will be thrilled, to help some of these initiatives happening in the country. Actually, I can't wait for this. For the situation to go back to normal and boring and taking planes again, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. Guys, our time is over. Thank you so much for being with us. There is this tradition. Let's use the last 30 seconds each just to tell our auditors how they can reach out to you, either the website of your organization, your Twitter handle, anything you want to share. Mubariz, go.
Yeah, so I'm available on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, wherever you want to find me. But LinkedIn and Twitter is where I'm the most active, talking about Pakistan and the opportunities it offers.
Thank you. Nadeem?
You can also reach me through, I'm not on Instagram and things like that, but LinkedIn and Twitter is there. Neem Exponential.com. You can reach me through there. My list, really, one comment was Pakistan Inc. is on the map and it's open for business. And, we are looking for all kinds of support around the world. And we would love to follow up, Matteo, on Time Pledge and some of the FinTech stage stuff, because I think we can really benefit.
Thank you. Taha?
Yep, LinkedIn it is for me, where I'm most active and connect with a lot of like-minded people.
Thank you. Guys, that was amazing. I learned a lot. I'm pretty sure our auditors did as well. Follow us on Breaking Banks EU. And thank you so much for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And it's a wrap.
Thanks for listening to Breaking Banks Europe, a Provoke Media podcast in cooperation with FinTech Stage. Don't forget to tweet us out, shout out, or post to the team at Breaking Banks EU on Twitter. If there's something or someone you'd like to hear on our cast, let us know. See you next week on Breaking Banks Europe.